Welcome back to our Axel F. This is Digital Performer Lesson 2. This is Part 3, and we've just entered in all the parts and pieces to this. We have our piece. If we're left at measure 26. Now our goal is to get this to a file, mix it, put it to an MP3 file. So what we want to do is we want to make sure our balances are correct. So we're going to come up to Project, and we're going to open the mixing board, which is Shift M, but I'm going to just pull it up under the project. And the mixing board looks like this, and it's exactly like a mixing board, an analog mixing board, where you can adjust your volumes and have a master volume and things like that. But we're just going to, you see down here in the bottom it has the name, our ARIA player. This is an overall volume for the player module, and then we have these individual volumes here. There's piano right hand, piano left hand, drum 1, hi-hats, and drum fills. So as we play the song, we can actually mix it. So I can pull down, I can pan it with this knob right here. Pan means panoramic, is it to the left? So I can I put the bass over to the right. You can put those anywhere you want to be. You can adjust the level of the drums. It actually sounds pretty good that way, I think. Okay, so once we've got the mix set up the way we want to, we can close the mixing board. All right, so we have it mixed the way we want it to be, and we are now going to let's add some reverb, some echo to the sound, so it sounds like it's not so sterile, and show you how to do that. And then we'll bounce it, which is rendering it to a stereo track. We have two more types of tracks that we want to add. We saw them before on our last lesson. We didn't use them, but I'm going to add them now, and they're called an auxiliary track and a master track. So we come up to Project, and we want to add an auxiliary track. You come to Add Track. It's down on the bottom here, auxiliary track. It popped in on the bottom, auxiliary track, and we want to add a master track, a master fader track. And that's where everything will pass through. And see, mine came in backwards, so I'm going to move those around so the master's on the bottom. So I come over here to the master, I come to the very left, under this move column, and I'm going to drag it so it's down below. Now the auxiliary, we have to have a way to feed this. We have to have a way to get the sounds to it. And the auxiliary track is where we're going to put a reverb, an echo that we can send a reverb to. So we come to the left and we see where it's playing, which that's fine. But over here on input, this is the first time we've used input, but we have to tell it how we're going to get reverb to, how we're going to get the sounds to this reverb. And so we come over on input and we click this and we choose a bus 1 and 2. And think of a bus as a way it gets you around town. That's how we're going to get the sound around. So bus 1 and 2. So bus 1 and 2 will now feed this auxiliary unit. So all these other sounds are going out to the main out, but we have a second route that will send sounds to whatever we put in this auxiliary. I know that's really confusing, but let me just go through it simple again. We had it set up so everything was going straight out. We added a master track, which allows us to have a master volume control. And then we added an auxiliary track, which is a secondary output, so that we can send these sounds a second path, and then we can affect them in some way. We're going to open up that mixer one more time. So go up to Project, and we come down, open the mixing board, and now we're going to see what we have. See all these little titles over here on the left? That's what we're going to see. Because I had just the auxiliary track highlighted, it opened up. But we're going to turn them all on. So we have everything in front of us. We have our ARIA player, our sounds, and our auxiliary track, and our master fader. So as we play, it's a master fader. See how that turns everything down? and we want that set at 0. Okay, so now in our auxiliary, we want to have a reverb unit. And so these 5 spots here are plug-in spots where we can plug in different sound effects or things to affect the sound. And in any one of those, you can click and insert some. We're going to start from the top to bottom. We click on the drop-down box, and we get all these options. A good one to use is down here. It's called Mo2 Proverb. And I'll take a minute to find it, but that's a very good one to find. And we open it up, and this becomes a reverb. This is a reverb unit. And when you use a reverb unit in an auxiliary spot, you want it to be 100%, which means you want all the sound of the reverb. If you turn it down to 0 and you put sounds through it, you'll hear the sounds just straight back out, unaffected. But we want them affected 100%. So we turn this mix up to 100%. And here you can also, you can choose different kind of reverbs. In this particular one where it says factory default, we're going to start there, but you could click and open this up and choose different types of rooms, European rooms, halls. These are just different kinds of reverbs. We're going to use the default, and then we're going to close it, but we can see it's still sitting here, the Proverb, and it's coming in. Remember we told it to come in bus 1 and 2, so we can look back over here. It says bus 1 and 2. Well, bus 1 and 2, so anything that goes to bus 1 and 2 will go to the reverb unit. So the only thing that is actually creating audio in this mixer is our ARIA player, which is over here on the left. So we have these little green spots here. Yours may not be green, but this is where we assign the bus route. It's like Aggie Shuttle 1. Well, we click on the first one and we say take bus 1 and 2, because that's what we told was going to be the input to this reverb, bus 1 and 2. It has to match here. So we have bus 1 and 2 here, bus 1 and 2 down here. And then this becomes a level send, a secondary output that will send to our reverb unit. So let's see what happens. I'm going to start with it down to nothing, go to the beginning, and I'm going to turn it all the way up. See, that's a little too much. So I'm going to back it down until it sounds pleasing to my ear. Okay, I'm going to stop it and explain what we've done. Okay, we have our mix, which is all these sounds are playing the ARIA player, which is going out the main output, going out to our speakers. We have the bus route, which is a secondary bus. And so we told the ARIA player to take bus route 1 and 2. Bus route 1 and 2 comes through auxiliary 1 because we assigned it right here to bus 1 and 2, which equals the spot, the input up here, bus 1 and 2. This bus 1 and 2 is the same as this bus 1 and 2 here. So the sound, auxiliary 1 gets its sound from bus 1 and 2. And we put in the plug-in a reverb unit. So now this bus 1 and 2, whatever we send to it, we get reverb plus the main sound. And so this auxiliary, this is called a fader. We can turn it up and down, and we can also affect the amount of reverb. I'm going to turn the reverb down. See, I turned the reverb down. Now I'm turning it's back up. Okay, so I like that. So once we get everything sounding the way we want it to sound, now it's time to render it as a file, an MP3 file. The way we do that is we select all, and there's 3 ways to select things. You Command A, or you can take the mouse and draw in this section of the playback bar, not up on the 1.9 because that'll take the sound, but down here on the 1.1.1, which is saying count 1 of that measure. Or we can draw a box around all this, but we want to include it all. So I'm going to go Command A. So once I've selected it all, this is what I'm going to render. So now our goal is to have it as we could have it as a WAV file, any kind of file, but MP3, which is smaller. All right, so I come down on audio, and we're going to bounce to disk. Means we're going to render it as a file playable as a stereo file that you can take. And this says, gave me a warning, this operation needs to create an audio files folder, which is okay. You must save the project now so the performer will know where to create the folder. Very good. So let's save this to the desktop. Save it as Axel F in class. Go Command D, so it puts it on the desktop, and push save. All right, so that created a folder on the desktop. I'm going to pull it over so you can see it looks like Axel F in class. Okay. Now it asks us what kind of file do we want to save. File format, WAV. Now here's something that's very important and that you know. A WAV file is a pure, what CDs have. And they are very big in size. They are 5 megabytes per mono minute. So if you have a stereo track, it's 10 megabytes per minute. That's why you can get about 12 songs on a CD if you do the math for a 640 megabyte CD. MP3 files, on the other hand, are 1/10 the size of that. They're a compressed file. They throw out data that's not needed, and so they get really compressed smaller. They're not high fidelity, but people are used to listening to them. So the problem is once you've created an MP3 file, you can't reconstitute it back to a WAV file. There's just nothing there to do it. So it's a common mistake to have an MP3 file, burn it to a CD, and it recreates a WAV file, but it's created out of nothing, and so it doesn't sound good. And so if you make another MP3 file out of that WAV file, you get a file that's 1/100th the quality of the original. You've got to be really careful how you deal with MP3s. Okay, so file format, we want to make an MP3, so we click on this and we choose the lame audio export MP3s next to the bottom here. And we want to call it Axel F. It'll add the mix on the back side of it as the name. And we want to choose a folder. So we click here and choose a folder. And let's put it on the desktop, just so we know where it's at. And then we hit choose. And now it's ready to do the work. So we push OK. And it'll ask you the settings. Let's just go for the standard setting, 128. That way it's not too big. And then push OK. And the computer will actually process it. And it takes a minute or two to do this. And while this is rendering, let me just repeat again that when you make a MP3 file, it actually throws out 90% of the data and it's lost forever. And then if you go to, and then when you go to make a CD from that MP3 file, it creates a WAV file from this non-existent material. So it sounds just like the MP3, which is okay. But then again, but it's a WAV file. So if you make another MP3 from that WAV file, it takes that same 10% of a sound and throws out 90% of it, and then creates another MP3. So if you ever have an MP3 files, and you burn it to CD, and then you make another MP3 file, you've done a bad thing to your audio. It's just almost, it's not worth listening to. So you got to really manage what your MP3s and your WAV files are doing. Okay, this is taking a minute because it's rendering it, and we're just excited to see it. We just kind of wait and wait. And wait and wait. So the next assignment, the Mendelssohn, we're going to do this exact same thing with the Mendelssohn. Okay, here we go. It's done. And I'm going to take my screen over here. I'm going to pull it so you can see it. I'm pulling it back over, but it says Axel F MP3. And if you double click on that, it will open in iTunes and play. Okay, if you'll come back, we're going to stop this, come back for the next movie. I'll give you how to do the final assignment, the instructions.